Glenn, of course, for the last few weeks, we've been talking about this Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, where the Trump administration has been defying the Supreme Court and the lower courts in their efforts to have this person released and returned back to the United States. It looks like the judge in this case, Judge Sines, has officially lost her patience with the Trump administration. I'm going to put on the screen right here and read what she just said in court. For weeks, defendants have sought refuge behind vague and unsubstantiated assertions of privilege, using them as a shield to obstruct discovery and evade compliance with this court's orders. Defendants have known, at least since last week, that this court requires specific legal and factual showings to support any claim of privilege, yet they have continued to rely on boilerplate assertions. That ends now. So, Glenn, what does this mean in the broader context of this case, and how unorthodox is it to see a statement like this from a judge?
Rarely do you see judges, particularly federal court judges, enter the kind of findings that Judge Sines entered in her 8-page ruling issued today. She went so far as to say the DOJ lawyers, the Trump administration, have provided the court with, quote, falsehoods, her word. She also said that she has found in several different contexts that DOJ lawyers have been acting in, quote, willful bad faith. Those findings are not just dramatic and extremely unusual. In my 30 years as a federal prosecutor, I never saw a case like that, certainly personally, or that any of my colleagues had, where federal court judges, were pushed so far that they reached those kind of conclusions and entered those kind of findings. And I want to talk in a minute, Brian, about the implications, the consequences to those DOJ lawyers beyond the Abrego Garcia case. What will now happen to them? But first of all, let's break down where we are in this litigation, because procedurally it's a little dense. Judge Sines has already determined that the DOJ lawyers in the Trump administration have very likely violated her court orders. The main one was to facilitate the release of Abrego Garcia and arrange for his return to the U.S., handle his case the way, it would have been handled had he not been unlawfully, unconstitutionally deported to El Salvador. And basically, the federal government, the DOJ, Trump administration, is like, yeah, Judge, no, we're not inclined to comply with that order. So then the judge set a very short time period whereby Garcia's lawyers could get discovery. What does that mean? They could get information and evidence out of the government pursuant to the judge's court order. They must sit for depositions. They must answer sworn questions that are propounded to them. And the Garcia team can make document production requests, and the federal government must produce those documents. Why? Because all of this is designed to determine ultimately whether they should be held in contempt, including criminal contempt, for intentionally defying Judge Sines' orders. So that is the context in which we now have this new court order, because Garcia's lawyer said, wait a minute, Judge, we've been trying and they've been stonewalling us. They've been deceiving us. They've been providing us falsehoods. They haven't been acting in good faith. And the judge sat down and she looked at everything and she said, you're right. They are providing falsehoods. For example, Brian, just one passage in Judge Sines' new court order. She said the DOJ lawyers are falsely claiming that the Trump administration has not been ordered to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release. She said, not only did I order it, but the Supreme Court affirmed my order. So she's like, look, you're the ones, DOJ, presenting falsehoods to this court. And I'm telling you, that can spell the death knell for the career of a DOJ employee.
Now, when you say it can spell a death knell for the career of a DOJ employee, do you mean that these people personally have some legal exposure, or at least their law license could be on the line by virtue of doing what they're doing in court?
Exactly. And we have to separate out two things. There are the professional consequences that might visit these lawyers after this judge made these rulings that they, in essence, acted unethically. And when you talk about the professional consequences, you're dealing with a Department of Justice headed up by Pam Bondi that doesn't really care about the rule of law or the oath that we federal prosecutors take of loyalty, allegiance to the Constitution, not to the president. So I'm not going to pretend that for the moment there will be professional consequences at the DOJ. But Brian, make no mistake about it. These people are not acting like lawyers when they go in and act unethically. What they are really acting like is, an aspiring dictator's little helpers in court. Right. They're like PR flacks for Donald Trump in court. And I'm telling you, that doesn't fly in federal court or in any court. But there's another set of consequences that will visit these lawyers now that they have been found to have provided falsehoods and been acting in willful bad faith. Here's the way it works when you're a practicing federal lawyer. First of all, you go to law school, you graduate, you take a state bar exam, and if you pass it and you become a federal lawyer at the Department of Justice, you can then practice in federal courts all across the country. You only need to have a law license from one state. But guess what? You're beholden to that state. And if you engage in an ethical violation, and if a judge finds that you engaged in an ethical violation, I can promise you these people will be referred, as they should be, to their state bar counsel for an investigation of that unethical behavior. And they can be sanctioned up to and including disbarment. Think about Rudy Giuliani. He had 2 state bar licenses, really only one state, New York State and D.C. It's not a state, but he was barred in D.C. He lost both law licenses. He was disbarred in both jurisdictions for what he did in connection with, the bogus challenge to the 2020 presidential election. So yes, these consequences will absolutely visit these DOJ lawyers, and I can only hope that may have a chilling effect on their willingness to continue to walk into court and do the dirty bidding of Donald Trump, because they're just going to lose their law licenses potentially one after another.
Glenn, do you have any concern that that isn't a big enough deterrent when they feel like they have the shield of Donald Trump, when they feel like by virtue of the fact that they're so enmeshed in his orbit that they can actually do this stuff and it doesn't really matter? Like, we've seen the ways in which the people who are close to Trump engaging in knowingly corrupt or illegal practices in deference to Donald Trump, and they just figure, look, I'll just throw my lot in with this guy, and hopefully proximity to power will just get me as far as I need to go. And so do you have any concern that these people are okay doing that, knowing full well that they're really just throwing their lot in with Trump and hoping that that is a bigger payout than continuing their career?
I do have a concern, and they may be feeling themselves in the moment because they've got, that protective shield of dear leader, but it won't always be there, Brian. It does feel like some of these lawyers are now, look, in for an unethical penny, in for an unethical pound. Bondi's got my back. Todd Blanche has got my back. Emile Beauvais has got my back. And ultimately, Donald Trump, has nobody's back, but he is the lawless leader at the moment. So they're kind of feeling themselves, right? But this will not last. At some point, Donald Trump will lose power. It may not be for another 3.5 years. It may be much sooner than that. I have a feeling if he acts to kill our constitutional construct by intentionally defying Supreme Court orders, then I think the landscape may change and he may find himself on the losing end of a political battle. But for the moment, it does concern me. And just by virtue of the fact that these lawyers have been willing to go in and do this, indicates that they're probably going to be willing to continue doing it. But here's a little bit of light. Remember how many lawyers resigned rather than do the unlawful, unconstitutional bidding of Donald Trump and Pam Bondi? Quite a few. So let's hope that maybe there are enough good people inside the DOJ who are still standing up, still holding strong, still remaining loyal to their oath. Because here's the thing, Brian, these people, when they go into court, these DOJ lawyers, they're representing the interests of Donald Trump. And that is a direct violation of the oath they take to represent the interests of the American people and remain loyal to the Constitution. So I don't know how they sleep at night, but at least for the moment, they're willing to do Donald Trump's dirty bidding.
Glenn, should these bars take a proactive approach now that we're entering this new era of just complete lawlessness at the hands of attorneys who, when they're working for the government, not only swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, but more broadly, they're there to defend the laws. And so because we are, again, entering this new era, because we've crossed the Rubicon and now we see so many attorneys using their powers for evil as opposed to for good, as opposed to defending the law that they swear an oath to uphold, is there some posture that these bar councils in each respective state should take so as to not feel like we're behind the 8 ball or chasing after something only when it's too late.
Yeah, and the good news is I think most state bars take a proactive approach, and here's how. I don't know the numbers, but I know many of the state bars have software, and what that software does is it literally scans and reviews all court transcripts and all court proceedings and reporting about matters in court, and it looks for judges who have made determinations that lawyers have acted unethically, and if that lawyer is barred, holds a bar license, a license to practice law in a particular state that employs this kind of software and engages in this kind of screening process, they're going to get caught and they're going to be hauled in for an ethics investigation. So I think most of the state bar council don't just sit back and passively wait for information and complaints to be filed or presented to them. I think a lot of them are actually much more proactive than that.
Okay, and finally, let's finish off with this. As far as the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, which is the case at the heart of what we're talking about here, what are next steps now that Judge Sines has kind of thrown the gauntlet down?
Yeah, so I think we're about halfway through the 2-week discovery period, the deadline she set for Garcia's lawyers to get all of this evidence from the federal government, the Trump administration, so then they can proceed to the next step, which will likely be the judge deciding whether she should initiate contempt proceedings. I think we're about 1 week into the 2-week discovery period, so I suspect we're going to see the case back in court probably in the coming days, maybe even for more discovery disputes, which is exactly what resulted in today's 8-page order by the judge.
All right. Well, obviously, this is, one of the biggest, if not the biggest case that the country is watching right now. So we will stay on top of it. For those who are watching, if you'd like to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. That's also the best way to support independent media more broadly. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.